Hey everybody, it's Rajesh here.
And Tane here.
Welcome to our podcast, Baskets of Knowledge, Chats with a Difference. In our podcast, we invite guests from around the country and around the world to talk about how they got to where they're at the moment. It's about a journey, it's about an experience, it's about their life. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Baskets of Knowledge. As always, we enjoy you having a listen to our podcast, and as always, we try and bring you some stuff that you, as a person or as your family, will enjoy listening to. Tanya, what have you put into your Baskets of Knowledge over the last week?
I think something I've learned since we've last done our podcast is just learning to prioritize things and knowing that, sometimes we don't have to get everything done. I think, when we're under the pump and we have deadlines that we have to meet or we've got meetings that we've got to go to, sometimes it gets a bit overwhelming in terms of what we're doing and, what we're actually setting out to achieve. But I think sometimes actually taking that step back and going, is this something I really need to do right now? Or is it something that I can, delay for a week and it's, the world's not going to end? And I think that's been important as I reset and get back into the university year, is reframing this idea of what's actually a priority and what's something I just want to do. And it doesn't really actually have the time frame to it. It's just something I want to achieve in the next kind of period. So that's been a good reflection for me for sure.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, sometimes we have priorities that have a deadline. And sometimes we have priorities that we put these perceived deadlines that have to be done by certain things. And sometimes they're created by society that you have certain things done. So there's things that have to be done by a certain stage. That's important. But there's other things that you can actually just say, hey, I want to take my time to make sure it's done, not perfectly, but done progressively. Because that's still fine. Yeah, it's a great learning, which top delves really nicely into what I've been doing over this last week. I've started reading a really interesting book. It's one that's been on my to read list for a while. It's Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Perez. Fantastic book. And just chapter one is just straight away, and it's called Extreme Ownership. That's the name of the book. And chapter one is Extreme Ownership, which is basically about, hey, you have to own. If you're a leader in whatever you're doing, you have to own the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when things are going bad, if you blame other people, you're actually you just lose your team's morale. And if you just take responsibility and you go, right, cool, what could I do better? And where did I fail? How did I miscommunicate? It just changed the whole vibe for you and your team. And as I reflect on it, I think about myself, my team, and the teamwork that we do, that, hey, it's not just about when you lead a team, it's the delegation comes down to not just success, but also the failures, and looking at that there. And yeah, I'll keep tweeting about that book because I think it's a really great book. If you haven't read it, or if you have read it, I'd love to know your opinions. So that's me. Yeah, extreme ownership. And here we go. Talk about extreme ownership. We're going to introduce our next guest, who is an amazing, amazing person who takes extreme ownership over what he's done over his life. Well, I hope he does. As you know, to our regular listeners, we scour the country, we scour the world to find people that we think are amazing. And as you know, we think everybody's amazing, and we're just lucky to get a couple of those amazing ones on our podcast. And today's guest is no different. He's a person that both of us have been very lucky to get to know and also work alongside. So it's very lucky and privileged for us to have Michael Fox on our podcast. Welcome to our podcast, Michael.
Kia ora, guys. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
No, fantastic. And for our listeners out there, we're going to alternate between use the word Michael and Foxy, because that's how we know Foxy is. So if you hear the word Foxy, it's because we know Michael as Foxy in our other world. So yeah, just be aware of that there. So Foxy, tell our listeners out there, let them know who you are and what you're doing at the moment, and we'll get into your story.
Awesome. So I'm up in Auckland at the moment. I'm doing my PhD at the University of Auckland in biological sciences, but I specialize in ecology, kind of conservation ecology. So looking after, I guess, our native species is kind of my goal and my kind of passion. So I'm doing research project up here looking at seabird restoration out in the Waitaki Ranges, which is a big kind of forest out west of Auckland. Kind of going up to 2 years up here. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. What a great way to start this podcast. This is where you are at the moment. Let's take Michael Fox down to year 13. If I say to Michael Fox is year 13, hey Michael Fox, you are going to be heading towards becoming a PhD, a Dr. Michael Fox. What would you have said to me at that point in time?
I would have asked what in, because when I was year 13 thinking about what I was going to do for my future, I had all of these options, thinking about what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. and it was almost kind of like a flip of a coin at the end of what I was going to do. Um, I've always been interested in animals and stuff, but I kind of saw that as, the passion, the interest. But when I was leaving high school, I was kind of like, well, what am I gonna, the classic, what am I gonna do with my life? How am I gonna get a job and get money? I was very much in that kind of idea of probably I was good at things like accounting and economics as well. So I thought, go and do business at University of Commerce, get a 3-year degree, go and work in that environment and wear a suit every day, go to work and climb up the ladder. So yeah, if you had asked me that question, I would have been like, oh well, what is that going to be? And I have no idea. Yeah, a little bit more into that. I remember towards the end of high school, sitting down with my mum and talking about, what am I going to do? And sitting there with these print offs from the University of Otago about what you need to do each degree. So I'd go and I'd look at all the papers and I'd write each paper I was going to do and kind of format these different degrees. I was like, oh, if I did a single, science degree, what would I minor in? If I was going to do a commerce degree, could I do some interest papers in biology and ecology? Or how about a double degree? What about, commerce and science, or commerce and arts, or arts and science? And I probably had, 7 or 8 sheets of these papers trying to figure out exactly to the letter what I was going to do every year for my 3 to 4 years at university. And I found out after my first year at university that they're going to be very different from what I had planned.
Isn't that crazy? I love that because a lot of us in our lives, as Tanya said at the start there, we try and have a priority and have a plan that we think we know what we're going to be doing. We see lots of young people and lots of adults as well. They have a plan for their life, that this is where the plan is going to look like. And at your stage, you're like, this is the plan. But then once you get into the plan just disappears. There's no plan. It just evaporates pretty quickly. So what is that first plan for you? So you flip the coin, and what did the coin land on with all your cheat sheets?
So what I ended up going with is kind of what my passion and interest was. So I was passionate about wildlife, the environment. So I decided I was going to do zoology. To that was kind of the closest thing to animal science. And I was good at biology at school. Otago doesn't really have a biology per se degree, so that was the closest, kind of a better option probably for me, being more animal focused. And then I'd always been interested in like the past as well, not necessarily history, but before that. Especially in year 13 biology, we did a lot of human evolution, and that was really fascinating for me. And where that kind of landed me is in archaeology or anthropology, which is kind of the study of prehistory, studying what people did before they started to write down what they did. And for me, that was really interesting, and it was something I'd never done before. And I thought, when I was flipping that coin, why not? This seems like it's interesting to me. I've always been interested in things like Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park and all that sort of stuff. And that just thought, why not? I'm trying something new, go for it. So I decided that I'd do a double degree in zoology and anthropology, and then a minor in geology, because I was like, oh, what about paleontology? There was one paleontology 3rd-year paper that you had to do 5 other papers to do. So I thought, yeah, I'll do those 5 papers so I can do that one paleontology paper. And that's what I started off doing. I mean, I kind of got there in the end. The geology didn't work for me after kind of sitting through it, listening about rocks, which are really interesting. I just wasn't for me. So I thought, I'll switch. I'll do something else, maybe something like classics. Thought that would be interesting. Did classics, and I was kind of like, this is not really for me. Then I switched and thought, what else can I do? I'm running towards the end of my degree. I kind of want to make sure I got a minor from the kind of what I was doing. So I ended up getting into Indigenous development, taking some Māori and Pacific papers, which was amazing. Really changed my understanding of, I guess, kind of New Zealand history, Māori culture, and definitely better for it. So I'm glad that kind of weaved my way through that journey and came out the other side of something that was really beneficial.
That's pretty awesome, because what I loved there was how you shifted and you changed and you didn't stick to your guns. Actually, this is not, I don't like this. I'm going to stick it up because I want to do paleontology. Like, no, rocks don't rock my boat. I'm out of here. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to find your thing. Before we even talk about all that there, Foxy, for our listeners, you're from Dunedin. Is that correct?
Yes.
You grew up in Dunedin. So you, as our listeners all know, in New Zealand, there's 8 fantastic universities. Why did you choose to stay in Dunedin when you could have gone anywhere?
I think I'd never thought I could go anywhere else. I thought, I was in Dunedin. I didn't really have the financial power to go somewhere else and stay at a hall of residence. I could stay at home for my first year, save up some money, get a job so I could go flattening the year after. So I thought it was just kind of, I knew I was going to go to university. I'd known for a long time, and Otago was, it's a good university, especially in science, which I wanted to do. Kind of was a no-brainer to me. So I never really considered going elsewhere. My mum worked and still works at the university as well, so I knew a lot about it to start with. So it was kind of like, why would I not go to Otago? So many people from around the country come to Otago. It seems silly to leave.
Yeah, and I love that because you made a choice that was, hey, it's sometimes you go, oh, you should have left home to learn about yourself, but you can also learn about yourself while you are living at home in a different environment. And as you said at the point in time, finances, you make the decision. It wasn't going to be a barrier not to go to university because university on your doorstep, reduce the financial barrier, and off you go. So there's no right or wrong here, and you went the way that was right for you at that point in time, which is fantastic. As you started your journey, though, did you find that living at home was difficult compared to, say, your peers who are now living in halls, or did you go, "Oh, this is all good. I can go home and have home cooked meals," or was it a bit of FOMO for you?
I think looking back, there's more FOMO than at the time. I think
Yeah.
coming from Dunedin, I think it was easy because a lot of my friends stayed at home for their first year of university. So all of my close friends that I spent time with were all at home as well. So it was kind of normalized. And it wasn't until later in my university career, and I guess now that I've met people that stayed at halls, that I kind of went, oh, that sounded like a really cool opportunity. Wish I'd had that opportunity, but at the time, I didn't feel like I was missing out. Yeah, kind of it was normal. Everyone I knew stayed at home. It was still, still had enough autonomy. I got a really good relationship with my mum, who I stayed with, so it wasn't like we're sitting there hating each other every day. It was coming home talking about what we'd both done at work and uni and stuff. So it was good.
Which is pretty special, right? It's pretty special, and I think for you, what you said, right, it was normal. That was normalized, and some people go, oh, make you feel like it wasn't normal. Actually, a lot of people around the country, around the world, go to universities, go to tertiary provider that is on their doorstep, and they still live their lives, which is real and really important to remember. And as you start your journey at Otago, what are the opportunities that arose? We spoke about opportunities. So obviously you spoke about your study, which we'll come back to in a bit. But as you start developing this, you got involved with quite a few things. What are some things that you're passionate about that you got involved in while you were at Otago, while you were studying, I guess?
Yeah, I guess one of the big things that the reason I know both of you is hands-on Otago. When I was in my last year of high school, I was lucky enough to go. It was called hands-on science at that stage, so got to go and spend a week at the university with like-minded people from across New Zealand, and kind of learn what it was like to be at the university. At that stage, as I said, I already knew I was kind of going to Otago, but I had no idea what I'd do. I think I applied quite late, so I didn't get my first choice, which I think, if I remember correctly, was the forensic science, because I heard that you got to do some really cool things in that program. Ended up doing food science as my main project for the week, which was awesome and amazing, but obviously ended up not being for me. So I really enjoyed that. And in I think it was my fourth year, I saw posters around university looking for redshirts, people to go and help at this program. And straight away, I really wanted to be involved because I wanted to give back that experience to other high school students, because it made a big difference in my life. So I was like, I want to help others do this. So I've done that. I think this year was my fourth year doing it, with a couple of years in between with a gap. But that's one of my highlights of my extracurricular activities throughout my time.
Which is, I mean, we're very lucky. Both Tanya and myself have got to work with you along in that program there, and as I get to see how much passion you have, and over the last few years, I've seen the passion grow and grow and grow, which is really beautiful. Is the passion, though, Michael? Is the passion for the program or for the young people for you?
It's the young people. It's helping them get an opportunity to. For one of the things, I think it's a great social opportunity for lots of these students. I remember meeting people that had come from homeschool that don't really have that much opportunity to meet like-minded people. So it's those people that don't have the opportunity for students to come and meet others that like them, create friendships that can last for might last for just a week, but that might be enough. But then it might last for weeks or months or years. And there's still people I know that went to that in 2013. So 10 years ago, still see things pop up on my Facebook of people doing amazing things. It's really cool to think, met those people 10 years ago, and in 10 years they're going to be the top of their field somewhere.
It's pretty crazy how when you look like that when you meet them, they're still young high schoolers, and also the ratios that you meet are pretty amazing, amazing humans. And in, like I said, 10 years time, they wherever they are in the country of the world, they're doing some pretty cool things there. But it all starts from that aspirational time. They've just been with them just for a week, but that week is pretty profound. It is pretty profound in so many ways. Were there any other things that are passionate for you along your time at university? Because what I like to tell people is when you go to tertiary, you do the tertiary learning, but there's other stuff out of the classroom that you really vibe. What are the things that you get involved in that really stirred you up?
Outside of university, I've my other kind of passion is football. I've always been big on playing football, soccer since I was 5. So I did a lot of that outside of university, but same sort of thing. I got into it to a point where I started to coach, kind of started, I think, 12 and 13-year-olds with a friend. And it's the same idea. It's just being able to provide these young people with opportunities and kind of gets like a mentor in that sort of space. It was great, especially lots of kids at that level. They have someone's dad or someone's mum coaching,
Yes.
and that's great. But there's often quite a big age gap, right? They're not cool having your dad coach or your friend's dad coach. But me and my friend Matt, who were kind of in our early to mid 20s coaching these young guys, I think they kind of looked up to us and thought, we're the almost like the cool older brothers. We're a little bit more lenient than maybe one of the parents would be with the sort of things that we did at training and games. And that was great as well, seeing these kids get better at football, but also growing as kind of individuals and growing into kind of from boys to men, which is awesome.
Isn't it crazy the power of sport? When you have a sport, you think about the sport, but actually as a coach or as a trainer, you see them grow and the confidence growing and the teamwork growing, which is probably the greater growth that you see than actually the actual sport itself. Seeing, as you said before, from young boys into young men, that must be pretty satisfying for you as you watch it from the outside.
Yeah, it's amazing. One of the other things I got involved in quite a lot, I suppose it's because of my experience, but disability information support, which I know, PJ, you've worked closely with before as well. My mum works there, so that's kind of how I got into helping them. They provide a note taker service, so I did that throughout my whole undergrad, where you take, in-depth notes during classes, and then you sell them back to the university, who gives them to the students who have disabilities or impairments that mean that they can't take notes themselves or can't attend lectures. So it's nice to be able to feel like you're doing something that's good for yourself, making sure you take good notes, but you're actually helping maybe one other person in your class, maybe 4 or 5 other people in your class. And through that, and I guess through knowing my mum, getting some other opportunities, working in some exam and test support and that sort of thing. And it's a really great cause. They do some really, really good mahi, and it's cool to say that I've been a part of that. Yeah,
it's pretty awesome. I mean, really lucky to be involved in that, and the work that we do is pretty special. And I think last week's guest, Lauren, spoke really highly about that, about how her disability and the support she got from the university, it didn't stop her from getting to where she wants to go. And it's people like yourself and your mum that work in that space that actually make it happen. Tanya, I'm going to go back to the coaching. You're getting involved in coaching as well. And what is that like for you? Work coaching with high schoolers. As Michael said, you're not a parent, you're on a different level. What does that feel like for you?
It's been a pretty quick learning curve in terms of, your responsibility as coach, because obviously growing up, playing the sport is one thing, but to then have to try and explain it to young kids is another thing. But it's been really awesome just to see the girls grow. Like we've had a quick turnaround in terms of getting ready for the South Island tournament, but it's been awesome just to see them have some fun. And I think that's what I want to bring into that coaching space as well. I think a lot of people go into coaching, and as Michael says, a lot of the times it's parents who might not have the knowledge to be able to, coach well enough, or they might have been in that position for so long that it's, it's my way or no way kind of thing. Whereas I like to bring it in and be like, let's, play some games that still teach the girls a lot of skills that they're going to use within their games and, throughout their life. And I think that's the more important thing throughout the coaching. So it's been really fun just to get in that space and actually provide that support and, again, give that passion through someone who's not a parent or a teacher, because I think that just grows kids, especially to see that, there are people out there that are passionate about what they do outside of, just because they've been there all the time. So it's been really, I've really enjoyed it.
And I guess for the both of you, getting involved in that space is for the young people, there's no emotional attachment. As a parent, there's emotionally attached to the young person and they get upset and angry or whatever. And if it's a school, there's another attachment. Oh, I need to do well because our school needs, depending on obviously the coach, that we need to get the points. Whereas for the two of you, you're like, hey, we love the sport and we want you to do the best that you can. Well, I'm assuming that I can't see both as being tyrants to be like, oh, what are you doing? 500 laps for you. No, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Which is like Satana and Fox, as you said, it's still about the growth that you see. Foxy, let's go back to your study. Because obviously getting to a PhD means that through your journey, you started finding what your niche was. As you started getting to year 2 and year 3, how did you start realizing, okay, this is the area? You said from a very young age you were interested in wildlife and animals. Was there a time at university or a lecture or a point that you're like, this is it, this is what I want to go down? Or was it still developing as you went on?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I look back, I think I was really keen to just, finish, get a job, go out and, do things. And so I ended up doing a double degree with that arts and science, which means I was kind of under the pump to get it done in 4 years, some school papers. I think it wasn't until the end of my third year that I did conservation biology, which was turned out to be my favorite paper I've taken at uni and one of the papers I've I guess scored the best in. I was doing that I kind of was like, oh, this is really cool. I really want to get involved in more of this. And then through that that fourth year, that in the back of my mind, thinking, well, how am I going to get more involved in this? And kind of looking at where I would go to if I went outside of the university to get a job versus if I kind of stayed in and kept going. I got to that point that I was doing well academically, and I thought that it would maybe be a waste of potential not to keep studying. So I ended up deciding to go and do an honours. So it's a 1-year course, which is quite intensive. You have to do some postgraduate papers and write a dissertation, kind of some original research. So I managed to find a supervisor for that, Nick Rawlins, in the Department of Zoology. And he had this project kind of almost, I guess, ready to go, just needed someone to do the work and the research. So I got involved in that. And then kind of after probably even a couple of weeks of doing that, I was like, this is what I want to do long term. Really difficult year, that year of honours, but got through the other end, ended up getting my marks back, and it was enough to, I guess, go forward and get a scholarship for a PhD. And then I kind of had that, I wanted to do more research. That was one of those opportunities I couldn't really turn down, the opportunity to get paid, I guess, to do what I love and go further. So it was decided that was the next step, to go for a PhD. Had to take a couple of years off. I was a little bit burnt out after 5 years of university. Wanted to take some time off, so I got a job to save up some money so I could help with when I had the PhD. Working towards it, had some kind of money in the back pocket and a little bit of more mental energy.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because burnout is real. And again, going back to our tennis at the start with priorities, you took the priority to look after yourself because you had, it's so easy for you to have the money and go, actually, I've got the money, I'm going to keep going. But hey, the money was there. You could look after yourself and do much better. Can I ask you a question about your honors research? Are you allowed to talk about what it actually was? What does the research focus on at that honors time?
So what I wanted to do is I wanted to move into a space that mixed, I guess, zoology, conservation, and my archaeology they've done the past. Yes. So I talked to Nick, and he's big into ancient DNA. So it's kind of it's not going to be a harder concept to explain, but ancient DNA is pretty much just old DNA. So things that have been dead for a long time still have little bits of DNA in them. And if you go through some kind of rigorous protocols, you can get a little bit of that out. And use it to look at how things have changed over time. So kind of think of Jurassic Park. You would have talked a little bit about this with Lockie, probably. Similar sort of stuff, but not quite that old. So I worked with piechag, which is a species of New Zealand bird. Didn't actually get to see any live ones, but I worked with some bones and some museum specimens. So I ended up extracting some of that, what we call ancient DNA from those, and comparing them from different parts of New Zealand. And then also to Australia to see how this bird had kind of, I guess, changed over time. And if we had lost any of this genetic variation, it would kind of indicate that we had lost some of its population size as well. So a lot of the birds in New Zealand have gone through these declines when we had Māori arrive first and then Europeans kind of lots of these species went downhill. And sometimes you can't figure out exactly what happened using kind of modern day techniques or modern day populations. We've got to look into the past. So I spent a lot of time in a little tiny room in a lab, kind of you had to wear little booties, gumboots, full body suit, face mask, one of those face shields, hairnet, 2 pairs of gloves, working in a a room not much bigger than what I am in at the moment.
Oh, crazy. And that was quite a journey for you. I mean, the step up from undergrad, from doing your undergrad program into this, how did you feel that as a step up for you?
It was a big step up because I'd kind of gone from I had to learn a completely new field almost with genetics. I wasn't that's kind of quite a hard science compared to ecology, zoology, which can sometimes be a bit of what you might want to call like a softer science. So having to learn about genetics and then actually go into a lab and do it was a pretty steep learning curve. But I really enjoyed it. I like challenges and I like to learn. So I kind of just pushed through it. Came out the other end and it all worked out, but there was definitely some rocky moments throughout the year.
Yeah, it's a pretty full on year. And I mean, Tana, you're just about to start your year in honors. And yeah, I guess, how do you feel about that, Tana?
I know it's definitely going to be a challenge. I think part of me looks at it, and obviously because you don't have many lectures or many, scheduled things within your year, it seems like you've got all this time in your hands. But, as I've learned through my summer research that I've just completed, I think you've got to be proactive if you want to see the end result and don't want to burn out in that last couple of months. So that's something I need to, sit down with my supervisor in the next couple of weeks and really figure out, what I want to achieve by when, so that I have a clear outline. And, again, it's not going to be perfect, but it's at least having that idea of, hey, having something that you're continuously doing instead of leaving it to the last minute.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you talk to Foxy and Carl, they'll be able to give you some advice at some stage about, okay, hey, this is what you need to do. And they might charge you, but that's okay. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Foxy, so that was what year was that? When did you do your honors?
2018.
2018. All right, great, fantastic. And you also, I know from our conversation before, you also had an awesome experience of going over to Bolivia. Do you want to explain, tell our listeners about that and what made you go there of all places?
Yeah. That was great. So that was the end of my honors. I think
Yes.
Ended up handing in kind of late October, and then start of November I was off with a friend to Bolivia. So how that ended up, had a friend Ella that was also in zoology. She was doing her Masters of Wildlife Management, and as part of that you have to do kind of a summer project. And lots of people go to places, like Stewart Island, maybe the Chatham Islands, maybe somewhere close to home. But she got caught wind of this place in Bolivia that had a potential project. So there was someone else that had already been there before who was doing this program as well, and kind of said, oh, you could talk to these people about going over. And then she came to me and another friend and said, oh, I'm going to go to Bolivia for summer to do this research project for, I think it was 3 months. And we're both like, oh, that's kind of a crazy place to just go by yourself. Are you gonna be okay doing that? And she's like, oh yeah, she'll be fine. I'm like, you sure you don't want to take someone with you? And she's like, okay, well, if one of you want to come with me, then you should. And then at that stage, I'd never actually left New Zealand, and I'd only been on a handful of domestic flights. And I went, sure, why not? I'll come. And she's like, really? And I was like, yep, let's just do it. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, she said, okay, I've got the project sorted. I've got the permission. I've just got to book flights. Are you actually in for this? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then that weekend, we're at the travel agent getting it all sorted and bought tickets to Bolivia. So I went for 7 weeks and she went for 3 months. And we ended up going to this wildlife sanctuary. So they are kind of an NGO, not for profit, and they have got kind of in the middle of the Amazon jungle, or but in part of the Amazon jungle, far away from everything else. They've got a camp, and then they've got they specialize with big cats, so things like jaguars, pumas, and ocelots, and then every kind of other animal you find in the Amazon jungle. They look after these individuals that have usually been kept as pets. So people in Bolivia find, a baby jaguar, a cub, and they think, oh, this will make a really good pet for my kids. And then, after 2 or 3 months, when it gets, bigger than your average dog, it starts to kind of get a little bit hard looking after this animal. So they don't know what to do. So they just dump it somewhere, or they give it to this place to look after. Or sometimes poachers will go out and they'll shoot a jaguar or a puma that's been, maybe attacking their stock, and then they find the cubs and they don't know what to do with the cubs, so they'll give them to a place like this. And what the really cool thing was about this place is wasn't just kind of keeping these animals in an enclosure and feeding them every day. They actually trained up individuals and volunteers to go and walk them through the jungle, like you would, put a dog on a leash and take it for a walk. It's kind of the extra enrichment, so it didn't have to spend its whole life in an enclosure in a cage. So I went over to Bolivia and spent 7 weeks walking a puma and a jaguar through the Amazon jungle, which is not something everybody can say.
Yeah, what a great way to spend a summer, right? This is pretty cool. And what is it like for you? You just said before that this is your first time living in New Zealand. What is it like for you living Dunedin, which is your home basically? So a place that is so foreign and so different. What is it like for you? What is it like for you as a person?
It was really interesting. I think it was being kind of just ending that honors that really busy year. It was a really nice break from everything. We went to go into the jungle where there was no reception. Once a week I could go and scroll through Facebook or Instagram or text my friends. So it was nice to kind of just be taken away from everything, and then just I guess just going through your day to day and not having to worry about anything else. But it was tough, going to like this tropical place where there's mosquitoes everywhere and it's 30 degrees and 100% humidity, but you still have to wear pants and gumboots and long sleeves, and then it will pour with rain all day and you can't dry your clothes properly. The food you get's not really that great. The water is not the best treated. It was hard work, but wouldn't change it.
It's crazy, right? For our listeners out there who are from around the world, New Zealand has nothing that can kill you. There's no crazy animals that can kill you. I mean, you might see a wild sheep maybe, but that's about it. So you go to a place where nothing can basically kill you, apart from the weather sometimes, to a place where there's things out there that could kill you, and a little in the jungle. What is that like? Because I reflect that because when I moved from Zimbabwe to New Zealand, it was the opposite. Okay, from a place where there's all these crazy spiders and snakes and all that kind of stuff. So I was always on edge. Even when I came to New Zealand, I was like, oh, I've got to beware. Whereas you went the other way around, where like, oh, life is cool here, and you've got to be super aware. Or was it like that for you?
Yeah, I think I was a bit naive going over thinking, the kind of classic mentality is like nothing can hurt me, and just going through. But then when you see those, the snakes, the anacondas, or those sorts of things that like go across your path, you kind of like, oh, I probably shouldn't get too close to that. But you have this, you've got this false sense of security that none of these animals can actually hurt you, but in reality, everything, like you said, can. Lucky enough that most of the time we spent in the jungle were on pretty clear paths that nothing was going to jump out at you. If you're looking around well enough, you'll see any snakes in the grass, but definitely some kind of close calls. Especially Ella, she spent a lot more time in the wider bush doing her research, so she came across some other things that I didn't bump into.
And what is the culture like for you? You mentioned earlier on that you did some Indigenous studies papers, which has helped you a lot. And you go over to South America where there's a whole different culture. Was doing those cultural papers a help for you as you met people from different cultures? Because I'm guessing the Amazon has got a whole lot. I'm saying the word Amazon, but it could be the small part. Has got lots of people from different places, different cultures, and different ways of thinking. Lots of Indigenous people, I'm assuming, or not really. I don't know.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, it was my first time kind of being in a minority, going over and being, we went to La Paz on the first day, and we went out to a bar, and you look around, and every single person, I'm the only white person in the room, which was, for me, that never happened coming from Dunedin. So that was really interesting to go, oh, this is what, lots of other people, particularly in New Zealand or in especially Dunedin, can feel like for a lot of their life. So that was really kind of eye-opening to me. Where it was interesting at the camp that we went to, there was people from all across the world. So we had people from Belgium, from the US, from England, from Australia, from all over. So it was really cool just to meet people and hear their kind of perspective on things. Didn't get to spend a lot of time with, I guess, more locals there. And the language barrier being in kind of a rural area, most people only spoke Spanish, and my Spanish was very, very poor. So I kind of would just walk around and smile and wave, and that was about all I could get the occasional "Hola, ¿cómo estás?" "Hello, how are you?" And that was about it. But it was it was really eye-opening to kind of see what it's like somewhere else.
I want to touch on what you said before. I think we forget about this, that you said at that point that you were the only white person in the room, which is pretty crazy to think about. And why do I think that? Because I had that moment when I went to India for the first time as an adult, and I looked around and was like, wow, everybody looks the same as me, which has never happened before in my life. I grew up in Africa where there's a whole lot of different cultures, and I came to New Zealand and I was like, everyone is pale skinned. So, it's pretty important for us to realize that, different people and different skin colors have these different moments. And I'm glad you brought that up because right now I'm working with some young people that have come to Dunedin and they've come to me to say, hey, I feel like I'm standing out because there's no other people that look like me. And, unless you have that awareness, the point, what are you talking about? You've had that happen to you. I've had that happen to you. And I guess, Tane, being modern, that's happened to you as well as you have gone through your journey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, coming down to Dunedin was that culture shock. And probably even in high school, I've talked about previously, being in the academic sphere, especially, being, one of only a few Māori in our school that were achieving academically. And it wasn't seen that, that was a big thing for Māori to achieve academically. And then coming down here, obviously the Māori intake into the university and across New Zealand, it is increasing, and those demographics are changing within these spaces, but it does take time to see those shifts. And I think now more than ever, these conversations are opening up more about, getting into these spaces and having people in positions that can role model those behaviors and, make it a more normal sense of what happens. And, on one side, it's a really amazing time and a, thought-provoking time to actually think about changing these things. But on the other side, it's making sure that you do it without the sense of pressure of, I need to carry on or I need to get in a high position because, it's for my people. It's not about me. And that's, a whole, we could spend a whole podcast on that. So yeah, just touching on that briefly, yes, I have experienced that. And it's, it's just being aware, as you say, is the key thing to understanding that point of view.
Yeah, and I guess, for Michael, the fact that so all three of us have had that awareness, which is how you can make change, where some people don't understand why you've got to make change because they don't have that awareness. So, it is quite profound. And thank you for bringing that, Michael, because that's a key point that, for us to have any change happening anywhere in any space, there has to be awareness, which is really beautiful. So you had your experience in Bolivia. Did you want to come back to Dunedin, or were you like, hey, this could be a pretty awesome to spend my post burnout time just enjoying life in Bolivia?
Yeah, I really didn't want to leave. After my 7 weeks came up, I was like, I wish I could stay longer. Kind of burnt through a lot of the money I'd saved that year on being there. It was a model you had to pay, I guess, to be there. But what you paid for was this, accommodation, the food, and then the food for the animals because they don't, they're not funded by the government. All of their money comes through from volunteers either going there and I guess paying a little bit more extra than what it costs for them to have you, and then people that have volunteered there before, when they go home, I guess they return and they donate, yearly or monthly, however they like to do. So I kind of, as much as I would have loved to stay, I was kind of nearing the end of what I could afford. I was actually only planning on being at the camp for 4 weeks out of my 7 weeks in Bolivia, but after week one, they have like some rules for the welfare of the animals. So you have to volunteer for at least 4 weeks to work with the pumas and 6 weeks if you want to work with the jaguars. So after week one, they said, hey, if you stay an extra 2 weeks on the end, or 2.5 weeks, we've got this opportunity that you can work with this jaguar rupee, which was kind of everyone knew that was the one that you wanted to work with. It was the jaguar that had the most kind of freedom when you would walk it and do things with it because it had grown up at the camp since a cub. So I was a little bit more accustomed to people. So straight away I was just like, yep, I'm never going to have this opportunity again. I'll never be in this place in the world with one of my best friends. And they asked if I want to walk a jaguar through the jungle. So how could I say no? So my whole trip to Bolivia, I spent, I think, 2 days in La Paz with altitude sickness. Then we went to the jungle. Then afterwards, I spent a day getting back home pretty much. So my whole time was really spent in this one area. but no regrets. I wish I'd stayed longer to do more time in the camp, but then also I wish I'd stayed longer to explore the country more. But I guess I can always go back.
Yeah, it's pretty special. It's also very clever marketing from the camp to say, hey,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't understand my weeks. It's pretty clever, pretty clever. So you come back to, and I'm sure, like you said, no regrets. You've probably learned a lot in that time there. And then you come back, and I'm pretty sure at that point in time you started working at the university as well in a different role, which is not linked to your research. And what is that like for you, working in a space that was totally removed from your passion, I guess?
It was it was great. I'm really glad that I took time off to work in, I guess, the professional realm. Because I feel like lots of people that go into academia, that's all they've ever experienced. They've only experienced working in an academic sense of the university. Even though my job for my 2 years was still at the university, I was doing administration for campus development, which is the team that work on all of the new buildings or refurbishments of buildings at the university. So it was really good because I got to know what it was like to work in a team and work towards kind of common goals, and more of like that collaborative sense in a way, and kind of getting through those sort of issues that you have in offices, which maybe you don't have so much when you get further down into academia, where it gets a little bit more individualistic. So I really enjoyed having that different perspective and the different way of learning how things work, and really lucky just to get a little bit of behind the scenes of how the university works. I was on a lot of committees, as an administrator taking notes. So I got to see how decisions were made at the university, in ways, how they spend their money and how they organize things. It gave me definitely a different lens about how the university runs and how it's organized, which would be great if everyone that studied at the university or went to the university got to see how that works.
Yeah, because it's quite a massive business, and I empathize with you because I went straight. I went undergrad, undergrad, honors, master's, PhD, no break in between. So you live in this crazy world where you just think academia, but actually the university runs on a whole different ballgame altogether as well, and you forget about that when you're just stuck into your little niche there. So I guess, like you said, it's pretty awesome for you, for your holistic learning to go. Actually, there's a lot more that goes on, to make the beast operate in a functional way, and you also learn about yourself and different things about teamwork and the professional side. And then when did you decide, this is it? I'm now ready. How did you know you're ready? You said you had a bit of burnout, not just physical but mental burnout. How did you know? Cool, bring on this PhD.
I think so. So I was in the kind of generic administration role for about a year and a half, and then another opportunity came to be a little bit more applied, working on the dental school project. So that was kind of, they said, we need you for this kind of 6-month period. And before that 6 months, I was kind of feeling like it was about time to move on. I was like, I felt I had reached the cap of what I could contribute to the job and about how much interest I had left in it. And then this kind of 6-month, I guess, side gig came up, and I thought that's a really good opportunity to do something I'm going to enjoy. And it's a really easy way to, I guess, then after that, then it's my time to move on from that. So then that's when I kind of started looking at finding supervisors or universities for a PhD. And then it kind of just all happened pretty quickly. I found someone that was interested in me. We had a half hour meeting over Zoom about what I'm interested in, what he does, and he said, "Look, I've got this project. You seem perfect for it. Apply at the university, and we'll get you up here as soon as possible. Try and make it by this date because I've got a trip planned. It'd be great to have you here." So it all happened really quickly, and I handed my resignation before I got accepted on the kind of hunch that I was going to get there. And then it was, finish, have a couple of days to pack up my stuff, and then drive up the country to Auckland, and start, on Monday.
It's crazy that happens. I've heard this so many times that people, with the intention, they go, "This is my intention," and then when it happens basically within a few days. From the start to the end process, within a few weeks, you've changed your mind, off you go. So it's pretty awesome. But also the cool thing for you is getting involved in the dental school project, which for our listeners out there, at that point in time, that was the newest dental school in the whole wide world. That would have been pretty cool for you to be involved in that there.
Yeah, it was great. I was working so they'd just finished the clinical building, or maybe not just finished, but a couple of years. So they were refurbishing the old building to make it into teaching labs and offices. So I came in towards the kind of the end when they're about to move everybody back into the building. So my role was coordinating how to move people from 5 different spaces across the university with all of their stuff and all of the lab equipment and teaching equipment into the new building, which is great. I like organization and kind of managing things. So it was a great way to learn how to communicate with people and get things done in a kind of timely manner. It was really cool. It was really kind of rewarding to move everybody into this building and then be able to go around and see everyone in this building. Where I got there, it was all gutted, and they'd only just started putting, the walls up and then the carpet down and the furniture. And so it's cool seeing that end process of, I guess, how you build a building.
Yeah, and how you get people into the building as well. So you have the building and then you have the people in the building, which is a whole different beast altogether. So yeah, what an amazing project. Let's talk about your PhD now. What is your PhD about? What are you doing?
Ooh, so was that generic?
Generic. You just keep it as generic or as specific
we'll
as
narrow
want.
it down to the specifics. But so the whole passion's conservation, looking after what we have, ensuring it can last for the foreseeable future. So as you guys might know, there's a big kind of issue of biodiversity loss across the world. We're losing species, populations, and that's not a good thing. As much as we like to see the different things that are cool, they also help us keep a functioning planet. So the more individual species we lose, the less likely we are to be kind of resilient as a planet going forward. And then what I'm looking at is specifically kind of seabird conservation. So seabirds are actually really cool. They spend, all of their time out at sea foraging, but they all have to come back to land at some stage to lay their eggs and look after their young, their chicks. So it means that they're actually quite vulnerable when they're on land, because they're not particularly good flyers like kind of forest birds are. They're designed to be soaring and flying out at sea. And the issue is with kind of a lot of places, especially New Zealand, is kind of invasive species, things like rats and cats and stoats. They go down and they go and eat eggs or chicks or adults when they're on land and can't really escape. So that's why when we go around New Zealand, we don't really see any seabirds anymore. They're all being kind of relegated out to our islands, up in places like Great Barrier or Little Barrier, and those sorts of places. That's where they are now, or kind of down south in the sub-Antarctic islands. Whereas back in the day, they would have been around all the coasts in New Zealand. So my project is looking at one species in particular, the grey-faced petrel. So they're kind of like similar to the titi down south, the buttonbird, but they're up in the northern North Island. Most of their populations are out on these offshore predator-free islands, but they've got a few smaller colonies on our mainland. So places out, there's some in Mount Maunganui, down in Taranaki, in Raglan, up in Tawharanui, and then out in the Waitaki Ranges, out West Auckland. So what's special about these birds is they're burrowing seabirds. So they build their own burrows like a rabbit would, and then they lay the egg at the end of the burrow in a little chamber. And then once the egg hatches, they pretty much leave their chick and they just come back every couple of days to feed it. So for things like rats and stoats particularly, that chick is really vulnerable because they can just go down that burrow and pull it out and have a feast. So it's quite special that they're actually out in these kind of areas like the West Coast. So my project is saying, how is this happening? We know that we've got more and more people in New Zealand doing community predator control, so going out and putting traps and catching some of these pests, but we don't really know necessarily how that affects local populations of these pests and then the local populations of our biodiversity, such as birds like the grey-faced petrel. So I'm going out to multiple places out west, looking at how many of these birds are laying their eggs, and then how many hatch, and then how much of those hatch to become fully fledged chicks and leave. Get a percentage of that, and then at the same time I'm monitoring to see how many rats and stoats are around these colonies, to see then how many traps people are putting out and what they're catching, and see how we can relate these all kind of in a linear fashion. If we want to get 60% of these birds to fledge, we need to get the numbers of rats down to, maybe let's say 10 rats per hectare, or probably less than that. And then how many traps do we need on that land, or how long do we need to be trapping to get to that? Because in New Zealand, we've got a recent history of just doing as much as we can without really monitoring what that does. So we go out and we trap as much as we can in this location, but we don't actually see what's the most efficient or effective use of resource. Maybe we could use less in that space and then move to another place and do some more there, and that would give us better results overall.
Oh wow, that's
That wasn't such a short summary, but that was as short and as detailed as I could do.
No, that's beautiful, because I think it's great that you've given us some perspective of where and how how this problem has happened. You know, as you said right at the start, New Zealand, and I guess a lot of islands around the world that have coasts have a lot of invasive species now that have come through European settlers or other settlers that have brought, you know, rats and cats and wild cats, and they're affecting the native bird species. And I guess specifically for New Zealand, a lot of our birds, like I said before, don't have very strong wings for being on land. So it's a pretty important thing. But what I liked about what you said was that it's not just about the affecting one individual species, affects the whole ecosystem. So it's important for us to work on the conservation, and you know, and focusing on. I had no idea that it was a burrowing seabird, which is pretty crazy. You know, you wouldn't think of a bird as a burrowing, would you?
Yeah, I think that's the really cool thing about this project and what we're trying to potentially tap into is just this is seabirds in general are just very unknown by the general public. You know, even before I started my PhD, I didn't really know about grey-faced petrel or burrowing seabirds, and you know, I'm a self-proclaimed animal enthusiast. So everyone out there that's kind of neutral or maybe doesn't like animals doesn't actually know about all the birds that we have. You know, everyone knows about the kiwi or the kakapo or the Kia, but there's these other really cool birds that no one knows about, and I'm kind of trying to work down this project of if people know about these things, will they care about them more? Because at the moment, you can't care about something you don't know about.
100%, 100%. And you know, this is where I love when we have the New Zealand Bird of the Year. You know, people start voting for birds, and you know, I know a couple of people on my social media feeds that are really adamant about birds that I've never heard of in my life, like never heard. You would have heard, you know, Anna Clark, I'm guessing, and so she's pretty adamant about her birds. And you know, like you said before, if in New Zealand, if you're from New Zealand, you've heard of the kiwi, you've heard of the kakapo, you've heard of the kia. You know, you've heard of those. Those are your three birds that you hear. But there's so many other amazing bird species of bird varieties out there that are pretty special and unique in this country, and I guess around the world as well. You know, this is just our small part of the world that we're focusing on. So it's pretty awesome the work that you're doing with your PhD. But also, I mean, like you said before, it's awareness. You know, I think what the cool things about doing PhD projects or any projects is the awareness that you start working in communities. And I've seen, you know, your post that you put up there. I mean, that's how I get excited. I see your post with you doing some pretty cool things with some random birds. I'm like, well, what bird is that there? Because I've never heard of it before. So how do you find that there? You know, is it the awareness that you bring out there? Is that also quite fun? And also the adventures that you have going around looking for these amazing wildlife.
I think the thing that's the coolest is actually meeting the other people involved with these birds. So as I said, a lot of the ones that are on mainland New Zealand, they're protected by like just a public community, people that hear about it and go, wow, that's cool, let me put some traps in my backyard. Then they go and they knock on their neighbor's door and say, hey, do you want to put some in your backyard? Or actually there's some down at the nearest beach, should we get some friends together and put some traps there? And that's what's kind of happened over maybe the past 10 years. And we probably went from having maybe 5 or 6 small colonies of 10 to 20 birds to now we've got some of them are up at probably 50 to 100 to even bigger than that. And that's no scientists, that's not DOC, that's not the government, that's not the council, that's these individuals out there that go, hey, this is our place, we're going to look after it, and we're going to have these birds, and it's going to be because of us. So just meeting these people that do this in their spare time, and then they get other people to also do it in their spare time, and then you take them out, you talk to them, and they're just so passionate about it, and they're just so happy someone like me is there to do the research for them. So it's really cool meeting like-minded people that are really doing the really important mahi.
And I love that, because what it shows is the power of the individual, the power of the community. Because so many times we say, oh, the government will do it, or the local council, or XYZ will do it. But as you said before, hey, if you're passionate about something, you can start doing that within your community group, within your neighbor, within your local beach, which is really empowering, and it has a huge impact. You know, whether it's 10 more birds or 20 more birds, it is 10 more birds or 20 more birds that would have been affected, that would have probably been killed by different reasons. So that's really cool. I mean, we can keep talking about your PhD forever and ever and ever, but we're not going to do that, because that's for you and your supervisor and your examiners. So we're not going to do that, and we'll we will read that on your articles. And I see the other day you had this amazing post as well being profiled at the University of Auckland, which is really, really cool. I want to swing back just quickly about an important part of your life that you realized you were burnt out. And I wanted to talk about that because people don't like to talk about being burnt out, and I think it's important for you as someone who's going through this to just talk about what did that look like for you, and how did you know that I had to just stop for a little bit because hey, I burnt out, and you didn't want to just push the button for you. What did that look like for you? How did that manifest for you?
I think the big thing is having probably issues with my honours project towards the end of it. That meant I was having to do 12 to 14-hour days to get on track for a deadline. I think it's a very you'll find this time is the honours deadline is this day. You hand it on this day. When you have masters and PhDs, you can get extensions. For the honours, it was like it's this day. This is when you hand in. I ended up having to hand it in the next day because I couldn't print it off in time and a few things, but it was that day. So I was pulling all-nighters, doing massive days, going in at 9 a.m. and then not going home to 2 or 3 a.m., getting a few hours sleep and going back and doing it, which is obviously it's not healthy and it's not how you do good science. Because I read through that dissertation, and as great as it ended up being, I could have done better if I had another week where I could have just done the same amount of work but across a 2-week time period instead of one. So I could have caught some of those mistakes, or I could have got a friend to read over a draft. But it was just like go, which was kind of like I just couldn't keep doing that, and I just had, I guess, like a sore brain from thinking so much. So that burnout was really the kind of, I can't just keep really putting my head through it, knowing that a PhD was going to be 3 years. After 1 year was stressful enough. What would 3 years of this be like? And I wanted to make sure I really wanted to do it for the right reasons as well. I wanted to make sure that I was going to get into this, and that was going to be for the right reasons, and kind of think through it and give myself time.
Yeah, awesome. Two things that I really like we said. That the number one was the fact that hey, the awareness of the burnt out. Your as you said, your brain was sore. And Tanya, hopefully your brain is not sore at the end of the year. Brain was sore. But secondly, I think that the key one is doing a PhD for the right reason. Because I think a lot of times, and I am a culprit. I did a PhD for the wrong reason because, well, I think it's the wrong reason. But you do things because you think you have to do it. But I think when you get to that stage where you're doing research 3 years, you need to be passionate about the project, and that's something that you want to do for a particular reason, as opposed to doing it because you have a scholarship or doing it because you have an amazing supervisor, all that kind of stuff. It's got to be. It's a 3-year project. Really, it's not it's a project where your life lives around that specific area. So I think that was the of the two. I think that's really important to go, hey, do I actually want to do this, and why am I actually doing it? Which is very important. Which again goes back ties right back to our start there, where Tanya spoke about priorities, and I spoke about extreme ownership. Where when you're doing your PhD, it is you're owning it. This is even you might have a supervisor, but at the end of the day, it is your project that you're going to take extreme ownership of it. Because if things go wrong, yes, you can blame the supervisor or the weather or whatever, but it's your baby which you want to take full awareness of because you know why you're doing the project. So thank you for sharing that. Foxy, we've been talking for almost an hour, and we can keep talking forever and ever. But what we're going to do is we're going to try and round up the podcast now. And I mean, unless there's anything else that you'd like to bring up that you think would be awesome in your story so far.
I think just adding that one thing to that kind of burnout and doing it for the right reasons. I know kind of after 1 year of the PhD, I kind of had that kind of like, is this right? Am I doing this for the right reasons? And kind of going through that process even after deciding that it was. So I think it's kind of healthy to talk about, even if you choose to do something, it's not always going to work out for everyone, and it's okay to change. I think that's what happened with you, PJ, right? You're like, this is not right for me. I'll do something else. But it's really hard to be in that position of trying to choose, do I keep going or do I stop? I'm lucky I had a good supervisor that said, if you want to stop, stop. It's, I'll back you up. We'll figure this out. We'll work on it. And he said, but, this is, you can do it. You can get through there and we can work through it. And that's what eventually happened, after kind of feeling that you had that support. Well, I had that support. I thought, no, you know what, I can push through and do this, and it will be for the best for me. But I think that's the big difference is if he wasn't supportive, it would have been a different thing of, well, actually, maybe this isn't for me. But he was like, if you want to throw in the towel, like that's up to you, and I've got your back. So
I love that. I love that. And I'm so glad you added that, because I think what's important when you start doing these crazy big projects is to have the support. Or even though I speak about extreme ownership, but when you have support, because you're still part of a team, and that is your leader. Your leader is your supervisor, and he's to take ownership and go, hey, Foxy, if you feel like this is too much for you, I've got your back. Versus someone who's going to make you feel pretty shitty. But also the second thing that I love, the second thing that you brought up was self-awareness and the self-reflection. You said after a year you self-reflected, and it's very important to self-reflect and go, am I doing this for the right reason? As you said, it gets challenging, it gets tough, it gets lonely. You question yourself, you question, why am I doing this here? What is this article about? Who actually cares about this? So, self-reflection and support is really, really beautiful. And I'm glad you added that on, because those are important things, but not just for a PhD, that's for everything in life. If your job, your workspace, wherever you are, your study, when you have support and the right people supporting and backing you, and also reflection. And this is especially important for our first year starting right now, and I might be listening to this, that it's okay for you to stop and go, this is not for me. It's okay. I can just stop. I don't have to be at university or whatever tertiary, or I want to go to university, tertiary, whatever it is. It is important. But like you said, Fox, it's important to have people that are going to back you and support you. So that's a beautiful addition there. We can keep going on and on, which is beautiful. I love it. Which is why I'm so glad you're on this podcast. We might get you back again for another episode. But our podcast is called Bastards of Knowledge. And every week we love our guests to share one piece of knowledge that they'd like to our listeners and ourselves to put into our basket of knowledge. If you could pick anything, either something you've said today or something that you haven't said today, that you'd like our listeners to put into their basket of knowledge, what would you say, Foxy?
Oh, I've got. Can I have two? I've got one that I thought about before and one that I thought about during. So I think this is
came prepared.
maybe,
Wow, I came prepared.
yeah.
Love it.
Maybe not necessarily knowledge per se in the kind of like learning new things, but I think something that I try to live off is don't be afraid to be a hypocrite. I think people get too bogged down on I thought this before, so I can't change my mind. But I think changing what you do or what you think is a sign of growth, and it doesn't take away from what you've done in the past. It just adds to your future value. So I think it's my kind of piece of knowledge that I kind of try to live by. Is it's all right to change your mind and change your views. Otherwise, we're all going to be stuck thinking like we were, when we were 18, which is not always. You don't know everything back then.
Yeah, and you still don't know stuff right now, right? You still don't know.
Yeah,
exactly. And I love that, because I heard this in a podcast saying, don't be married to your ideas. A lot of us get married to ideas, and we think if we marry to them, we can't change them. And like you said, don't be afraid to be a hypocrite. It's all good. It's awesome, beautiful. Yeah. And what's the second one?
My other one is it's better off to get 10 people to give 10% to something than one person to give 100%. And I kind of work off that with looking at conservation issues, environmental issues. They're better off if everyone in the world just gave 10%, than 10% of the world giving 100%. So.
That's beautiful. I mean, that's profound. I love that, because a lot of the time we want everyone to give, but sometimes if you just give, if a lot of people give a little bit, then the overall goal is going to be more massive. And also, and like you said, every one of those 10 people feels like they've contributed versus one person. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, those people that do the 100% then get resentful of everyone else that don't do it as well, and that's not a healthy way to live.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, hey, for our listeners out there, you got two for the price of one. This is amazing. Thank you so much, Foxy. Tony, anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's been really good to get to know a bit more about Foxy's journey and the journey he's been through, but also listen about different things that I've never really thought of before. And I really like this idea of 10 people giving 10% instead of one person giving 100%. And I think that goes for the commitments we take on as people through our journeys as well. I think often we try and we always want to give 100%, and that's awesome for being passionate and wanting to do an amazing job. But if you try and give 100% to everything, you end up giving 0% to everything, because you can't afford to give 100% to everything. So it's leading back to that self-awareness around, again, about having this understanding of what are you truly passionate about, and what is something that you are still interested in and still want to achieve something in, but you don't have to give 100%, and you don't have to feel guilty that you're not giving 100%, because things are still getting done, and there's still that champion in any area that you're in, that is giving that 100% or giving more than you are. So yeah, it's been really good to just think about these things as I move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that the 10 people, 10%. That is beautiful. Foxy, that's fascinating. I'm going to write that down somewhere. And I'm going to share that. That's beautiful. Foxy, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up this podcast?
No, I think that's all from me. Just a big thank you to both of you. This is awesome. It's a great opportunity, and the mahi you're doing is amazing.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing this. For our listeners out there, hopefully you've enjoyed this podcast. We've heard Fox's story as he spoke about staying at home, because why not, staying at home, finding out his passion, but also seeing how Foxy changed, so he went from, I'll try geology to get to paleontology. Oh, not my jam, changed my mind. I'm going to try something different. Checked in some Maori and Pacific papers there, which has helped him as a young person, as a young adult. Realized that, hey, he wanted to do some research, found his jam, had an adventure in Bolivia, because why not? Imagine having your first flight out of the country to Bolivia. I mean, that's pretty epic. But also not being afraid to try something in a professional sense. Now doing a PhD in a space that is pretty, not just important for New Zealand, but also for conservation worldwide. So it's a great episode. Thank you so much, Foxy. Thank you so much for your time. We look forward to seeing your publications, but also all the awesome work that you do. And also for myself, and I'm speaking part of Tane as well here, it's really awesome that we get privileged to work with you over the hands-on Otago time. So thank you for your time. Thank you for all that you do. And thank you for being on podcast. For listeners out there, hopefully you've all picked up something from this podcast here. If you haven't, like we always say, jump online and re-listen to it, because there's lots of wise words here. Please feel free to share this with anyone in your community, your friends, your family, your children, anyone that you think is looking to work in the space of conservation, anyone that you think that is thinking about, hey, university is my thing or not my thing. We'd love for you to share this on whether we can grow this podcast here. Until next time, thank you for listening. Ka kite, and take care. And don't forget to put something into your basket of knowledge. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge.
Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your basket of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.